right. All right. Well, it's definitely a packed house tonight. So thanks to everyone so much for coming. It's really nice to know that in the days of YouTube Shorts, TikToks, and Instagram, that we still have book lovers amongst us. The motivation for putting together this was really that my mom is an artist, so I'm passionate about supporting the arts. And there's no artist I'd rather support than Claire Jia.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Wow, Oliver.
Yes, and that's the sweetest I'll be all night. So.
Let's go.
So just a little bit about how we met. So I actually went to a book talk that Claire Jia was presenting at, and I thought it was fabulous. And while she was autographing my book afterwards, I asked her if she'd be interested in actually bringing that book talk here to the Mars community. And to my surprise and to my delight, she said yes.
Yeah.
So that's where we are tonight.
Yes. It was really nice to meet you. I feel like this is the first time. I feel like I'm a debut author, my first book, and I went on a huge tour, and a lot of the people who came were my friends, which was super heartwarming. But then you were one of the first people that I'd met that I didn't know, and just sort of came to the event, and so it was so amazing that we got to connect.
It really was. So hopefully this can be the genesis of a long-term friendship.
Yes. Wow.
So,
you all were here for it.
Yeah. So thanks for coming, Lindsay. Thank you. We have another chair over here. I think you're good for now. Okay. So here everyone should have a copy of these PowerPoint slides. So the reason why I printed these out is I've just found that when going to book talks, sometimes it can be hard to follow along if you don't have something like this written out. So hopefully this will inform our discussion. I was very careful to remove the spoilers, so hopefully nothing is given away.
Thank you, Oliver.
And because there will also be books for sale after the event, if that's something you'd be interested in.
Yes, please. Okay.
So here on the agenda slide, this is what we'll be talking about tonight. So first of all, we'll be talking about Claire's background, because I noticed at the book talk that I went to, we didn't really talk much about your background, and it was something that I was really looking for. Yeah. And I think other members of the audience will really appreciate getting to know the artist behind the art.
Thank you.
And then we're going to be talking about the summary of the book, the cast of characters, some themes, a couple powerful quotes, some final questions for you, and then we'll have an audience Q&A. And although there's a Q&A specifically for the audience members, feel free to pipe in at any time. This is meant to be interactive, so if you have any thoughts or comments, don't hesitate. So let's talk about you first, Claire. So yes. I know you're a first-generation Chinese American born in Chicago, but I understand you spent many summers in Beijing.
Yes. So my novel Wanting tells the story of two estranged best friends who reunite in their hometown, which is Beijing. They're both young women on the cusp of 30. And I wrote it because my family is from Beijing, and I grew up going there every few years for 3 months at a time. So I have this very deep relationship with the city, and it's always felt like my second home, if not my first home. I was born in Chicago, raised in the suburbs, the most boring childhood you could possibly imagine. So, which is great, it's good to have a boring childhood. And then because then everything else in the world seems very fun to you. And but I would go back to Beijing, which is one of the biggest cities in the world, on these summers, and it was just very exciting. And at first, I feel like Chinese Americans, and I can get into this later, I feel like we definitely, for the most part, there's not as much of a sense of wanting to hold on to our culture, and not it's nobody's fault, but it's just sort of the way we were raised. It wasn't something that was emphasized a lot, like Chinese language and being really connected to the culture. But for my family, my mom is a Chinese teacher, my grandma was a Chinese professor. It was just very important. It was my parents were not strict about anything, but they were the one thing you have to be good at is speaking Chinese. So it really got pounded in my head. I don't know if it's Stockholm syndrome, but I was after a while, I was I love it. It's amazing. And it was the pivotal moment for me was in 2004. I was 10 years old. Went back to China with my mom, and I learned Chinese with my grandma every day for 3 hours. And she sit me down. Yeah, I was okay, discipline. I lost all that after that. Right? But my Chinese got a lot better, and that was the summer that my whole life changed, where I realized I actually want to do this and I like this. So came back to the U.S. and just really threw myself into learning all things Chinese, and then I wrote a whole book about it. Wow. So That's crazy.
That's so cool. So I know you speak Chinese. I speak some Chinese. So let's just do this whole talk in Chinese.
Yeah.
Okay.
You'll catch on.
so I think it's really cool because originally you wanted to be the U.S. ambassador to China. So you wanted to approach China from a political lens.
Yes.
But then now you're examining China from a more artistic lens. Can you talk a little bit about that shift in mindset for you?
Yes, I specifically wanted to be the U.S. ambassador to China, a dream that I had since like this kind of transformative summer as a 10-year-old. My grandma really wanted this for me. She's like, this is the way that you're going to be able to see me more, is to become the ambassador. I'm like, yes, you're so right.
Yeah.
So I threw myself into that goal, and I studied political science in college. I like did everything, did Model UN, every club that would like allow me to pursue that path. But then my last year of school, the summer before my last year of school, I just realized that this wasn't the path I wanted to pursue. It's like it's really interesting being in DC because this is where I always thought my life was going to lead. I assumed I was going to move to DC after college, work for the State Department, work for the UN, like do something in international relations, before I became the ambassador. But then I just had a complete 180 where it was a combination of my sister was applying to art school, my younger sister, and then I studied abroad in Paris the spring of my junior year, and I met a lot of film students. And then I started realizing I'm surrounded by all these artistic people, and they get to do all these like fun, creative things. And why don't I get to do that? Like, why do I have to like go like I don't know. I didn't even know like what a life in politics even entailed, but I was like, sounds like I have to like work in an office and like I don't know, do things that are hard. I don't know. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to change paths. I'm going to instead move to LA and become a TV writer and write a novel because that's easy. Okay. So that is what happened in 2015.
Wow. So that's so fascinating. Yes. So you started working on a novella in college that became Wanting, right?
Yes. So basically that summer before senior year, I had to write my senior thesis. I went back to Beijing to do research on a topic which originally was how does political propaganda affect the intimate lives of people in Beijing? Because I had grown up watching Chinese television, and it wasn't until I gained sentience around age 19 that I was like, oh, actually, there's only certain kinds of stories that are allowed to be told in China. And so I was really interested in how that might affect the way that people go about like their daily lives and especially their love lives. So I went back and I did research, aka I just like interviewed a bunch of people about their sex lives. And that was wild. People were actually quite forthcoming.
Oh, really?
And I came back and I was supposed to write this thesis in poli-sci, but then I realized that like what I really cared about was just the stories that these people had told me. So I asked my advisor, can I just like write this thesis as a novel? And she was like, you can try, I don't know. And then I did it. And she was like, this is not a thesis in political science. And I was like, fair enough. So I just dropped the thesis and I decided to finish it as a novel because that's what I wanted to do. And never thought anything was going to happen with it. But then a few months after I graduated, I had a piece come out in the New York Times in the Modern Love column that was about like my own experience trying to make my best friend my boyfriend in college, and it didn't work, whatever. And then so people became it. Like I had some interest from agents, and then my agent was like, "Have you written anything else?" And I was like, "I've written this novel that I never thought anything was going to happen with it." And then she read it, she loved it, she wanted to work with me on expanding it, and I was like, "How hard could that be to expand it?" And then it took me 7 years after that to finish doing. Yeah.
Wow. So it took you about 10 years in total to write Wanting, right?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. And if I'd known it was going to take that long, I probably would have never done it.
I hope I'm not triggering any trauma by talking.
You know what? I trigger my own trauma every day by looking at this.
So I know you were working as a television writer. I mean, you worked on Fresh Off the Boat. How was the novel an anchor for you? I mean, was it something that you could turn back to and feel like you were making noticeable progress on something?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, the life of a screenwriter is one of the most unstable things you can try to do. Okay. And I went out to LA at the end of 2015, was just doing the classic, I was working in restaurants, taking gig work, just doing everything I could to get my foot in the door. Then I slowly climbed the ladder, did the assisting, went from PA to writer's assistant. You know, I was working on Fresh Off the Boat as a writer's assistant, and it was very exciting to kind of like see how I was progressing as a screenwriter. But then, oh my goodness, but at the same time, the work was very inconsistent, and I'd only work for half of the year on a show, and then when I wasn't working, I would. Oh my God, thank you. I would have to thank you so much. Oh wait, thank you, Junhan. She's very nice. And and it was during the times I didn't have work, I would turn back to my novel and work on it, and it was like a thing that kept me afloat during those 10 years, because it was always a thing that I could hold on to and be like, this is the thing I care about. This is the thing that I actually like writing, despite many days that might, prove otherwise. I was happy sometimes writing this, and but yeah, it was like, in Hollywood, it's such like your self-confidence and like your feelings of like, what am I even doing here? Like it all gets very tested, and but my book was the thing that I could constantly be like, this is what I'm working on and what I'm working towards. So it was an anchor for me.
Nice. I'm sure it's a great project to work on. So speaking of that project, why don't we get to the book now? So I know Claire provided a summary of this already, but I also have a more in-depth summary on the next slide.
Please.
So like Claire mentioned, this story is about two friends. On one hand, you have Li An, who has a stable life in Beijing. So she has a good job, a long-term fiance who's very stable, and ambitions to buy a luxury condo. Meanwhile, her childhood best friend, Wen Yu, moved to the United States when she was a youth and became a glamorous YouTube influencer who became engaged to a Silicon Valley tech millionaire. So the setting for this book is that Wen Yu has come back to Beijing, and now that these two friends are reunited, all types of emotions spring to the surface, like envy, resentment, and dealing with their lost time and their distance. So that's the first half of the story, and the second half of the story deals with an architect named Song Chen, who is hired to build Wen Yu's home in Beijing. He had studied to get his PhD in the US. It didn't work out, and now he's back in China as an architect working on that home. So that's the story. And on the next slide, we have the cast of characters.
Yes.
So I don't know if you want to talk about this, Claire.
Yeah, I would love to. I love the summary you wrote. I feel like it's great. And
sorry, we have a question.
Oh yes. No, he's older. He's in his late 50s, and he's like my parents' generation. I wrote him because I wanted to kind of explore the emotions that my parents might have been going through as immigrants in the U.S. and to answer the question of to ask the question of like what would have happened had they not succeeded and been able to stay here. So he's someone that went for his grad school studies, but then for one reason or another that you will have to read the book to find out, he had to come back and back to China, and he's made his life here now, back in his hometown. But whether that's a story of success or of failure is something he's grappling with.
Sounds like a fascinating book.
Thank you. He's the first character I ever wrote for this book, and so I'm very connected to him. It's interesting. The first chapter I ever wrote in this novel was the last chapter in his story. Yes. So I was very much drawn to the image of like a sad middle-aged man.
We have plenty of them in this room tonight.
I'm glad we can relate. But no, he's interesting. I like him a lot because I think he's someone who's very sympathetic, but then definitely has flaws, as I think all the characters do. Lian is the main character, at least at first. She is the friend that stayed behind in Beijing. She's the POV character, and then she's looking at Wen Yu, the second person on this list, who is the kind of very successful person on the outside. She has a YouTube channel. It's very popular, and so in all ways, when you look at her life from the outside, it's very impressive. So it's a kind of classic story of comparison and jealousy. But then when they come back together, because Wen Yu has come back to Beijing to marry her American fiance, Lian starts to see like maybe the story that Wen Yu's been telling to the public is not the reality of her life. Maybe she's not as happy as she pretends to be. Yes, and then Thomas is her fiance, the American man, and he represents just sort of like I definitely wrote him just more as a stereotype because I basically in this book I wanted to flip what happens to like people of color in like a lot of like books written by white people in America where like I feel like people of color are often caricatures and I do this thing where foreign languages are often are italicized in most in like books that are written in English. And so in my book, I italicize everything that's spoken in English because that's like the foreign language in the book because everything else is in Chinese. So similarly, I italicize Thomas. I like kind of make him more of a caricature. He's just like a stereotypical like SF tech bro. So he's like a loud guy who is just there for a good time, and but he's kind of funny. But yeah, we don't learn that much about him because he's more just to represent the kind of like so-called American dream. And then we have Chen, who is a character we meet later in the novel, the architect, and then we have two others who are men that come into these women's lives and. We'll see what happens with them.
Yeah.
Yes.
And one thing that's really neat about your book, Claire, is so the first half of the book is told from Leanne's perspective. The second half of the book is told from Chen's point of view.
Yes.
But then they end up colliding in the end. So you have what you think are two different point of views, but actually end up mixing, which I think is really cool.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'm glad that worked for you. It was definitely a swing.
Yeah.
A lot of people can get pretty surprised when they get to the second part and it's narrated by somebody else.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, so let's talk about the themes. So one thing I wanted to highlight in this book is the stories we tell ourselves, right? Because the conflict between Leanne and Wenyu is really just a figment of their imagination. Because on the one hand, you have Leanne thinks that Wenyu abandoned her by going to the United States, not really giving a formal goodbye. On the other hand, Wenyu thinks that Leanne judged her, and once she went to the U.S., pulled away.
Yeah.
The problem is neither of them say anything out loud, right? All of this just is a miscommunication that could have been addressed if each person were able to vocalize their concerns with the other, but neither does. And I think that this really highlights how our conflict with other people oftentimes does not come from action, but just comes from our interpretation.
Yeah.
And that we don't actually need conflict to create distance. All we need is just our mind wandering.
It's true. It's true. I love the way you wrote this. When Oliver and I were rehearsing, I was like, you really like got what was happening between these two characters, because I really wanted to kind of examine the kind of truths that we tell ourselves and how like different people can view things, have entirely different stories that they tell themselves. And Leanne is someone she's the point of view character, so we're with her, and she sees her life as less glamorous, she's less successful, and just less literary in all ways. To all of us reading, we might all agree, like, yes, Winnie seems like she has like such a great life, like house in SF. Who has a house in SF? Not me. And so it's like her life seems like impossible in all these ways. Also another thing to mention here is that Leanne was always growing up. She was always the one that really wanted to go to the U.S. She had big American dreams. Her English, when she started learning it, she took immediately to it. Her English was always really great, and she was the one that was expected to go to the U.S. But then, for one reason or another, she just is not able to test into an American university, so she never goes. She gets one round of rejections, and is like, my American dream is dead, and she never tries to pursue it again. But Wenyu is someone whose grades were always not as good as Lian's. She's just not a very good student. Didn't care that much about the U.S. Kind of wanted to go to the U.S. because Lian wanted to go. It was kind of she's like, well, I'll do whatever my best friend does. But then she ends up going to the U.S. inadvertently because she's kicked out of school and has to go stay with her father's friend in California. And then she tests into a school there. So it's kind of this ironic thing where it was Lian's like ultimate dream, but Winyu just goes there almost by accident. And so Lian sort of harbors a lot of bitterness since she was like 17 years old, which is when this happened. and just feels like, when you kind of took my dream from me. So, it's kind of like when your friend does something and suddenly it's their thing, and it's like it's not your thing anymore. So that's definitely what Leanne went through, and so she decided, like, if I'm not going to get in, then whatever. That's Wenyu's thing, and I'm here. Oh, there's a question.
So I just want, before you go into, I just wanted to get a broader perspective.
Yeah.
How did you arrive at the overall architecture of this? The reason I ask is because I'm trying to connect the dots
Yeah.
between what you were saying earlier.
Yeah.
And now you're getting into the details of it. How did you arrive at the construct of this sort of structure in which you filled in all kinds of fascinating information? I mean, that's why I'm curious about that part.
So thanks for this question. I was always interested in characters and themes that regard people who feel like they haven't gotten what they want in their life, and this novel has changed a lot in the last 10 years, but the thing that has not changed is it's always been narrated by Lian and by Chen. These are both characters who, from the outside, it's funny because Lian's out here saying, like, Wenyu's the one with everything, but actually Lian has a pretty good life. She has a partner for a long time. They're looking at condominiums together. She has a good job. She has a life that other people would envy and do envy, but all she sees is the lack. And I feel like anyone can relate to that. And Chen too. Chen is someone who failed in the U.S. and came back, and that failure has hung over him like a ghost his whole life. But he has raised a beautiful family back in his hometown. Like, he has his own business. Like, there's many things in his life that are good, but it's just the way that he looks at it. It's like he only sees what he doesn't have. So I feel like those two characters really drove the story for me. I knew I wanted it to be narrated by them, but the way that they related and how the stories converged changed a lot over the course of a decade. And he was not always, so he's the architect that's building Wenyu's home in the suburbs, and I arrived at that kind of like several drafts ago because I wanted him to inhabit a space where he's interacting with Wenyu and jealous of her as well. Like, both him and Lian are looking at Wenyu and being like, why can't I be her? And so I think once Wenyu is also a character that was a little bit new, actually. It was not always I was not always examining the lens of what can't I have or what don't I have through a character that lives in the US. It used to be like a different structure that I can get into. But once she came into the story, it became clear how those two needed to relate to her. But yes, those feelings of envy and lack are definitely what drove the characterization and the structure. Yeah, of course. Of course.
Yeah, it's at that point. I think the theme of wanting obviously is throughout the entire book. I mean, it seems like the characters, and like many of us, are always searching for something else.
Yeah.
Whether that may be a better job, more meaningful work, a partner more attentive to our needs, a better body, a better car, what have it. So I think that's really a theme here throughout the book. Is everyone has a fantasy of what they want their life to be, and they feel a sense of disappointment that it's not there.
That's true.
And we get to this later, but there's one character who later realizes that she has enough.
Yeah.
And once she realizes that, she feels a lot more happy and content with her life. So I think that's something that many of us are struggling with outside of this book. It's just to find contentment with what we have, as opposed to always wanting something else. So that's something that I found from this book, is just accepting what it is and finding contentment with that.
I love that that's what you got from it too. And because I feel like the book is kind of a litmus test for people of what is your relationship to contentment? And is that what you seek, or do you seek kind of like a constant pursuing? And that works for some people as well. And it's sort of like these characters land at different places on that spectrum.
Yeah, or in some find even contentment in the pursuit, right? So
exactly. Certainly I relate to that. So yes.
So I want to talk about the next theme, which is reverting to old versions of ourselves. Yeah. So something really interesting is that Lian, like I mentioned before, is very stable. She's married to someone, or she's engaged to someone very dependable. But once Wenyu comes back into her life, she starts making reckless decisions, and she starts reverting back to who she was when she was a child, when she knew Wenyu. And I'm sure many of you, like myself, find ourselves reverting back to who we are when we encounter people from our childhood. So, for example, my brother is here tonight, and find myself maybe acting a little bit more juvenile in his presence.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
and so I think that's super interesting how like when we meet people from our past that we haven't seen in a while, we start, even though we've grown in the time since then, we start coming back to who we used to be.
It's true.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like the people that know you the longest, they see the old you, sometimes yous that you've outgrown. And it can be very frustrating because I try to examine that a lot between Lian and Wenyu, where it's like, sometimes you feel like you've outgrown something, but your friends still see you as like the person that's making those same mistakes.
Yeah.
And maybe they're right. Like maybe we haven't grown as much as we think.
Yeah.
I don't know.
In some ways, it's a good thing that they know you your whole life because they know you best. On the other hand, sometimes it can stop you from evolving, right? Because they still know the old version of yourself.
It's true.
I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that.
No, it's so true.
Yeah.
Okay. Any toxic old friends
we
we want to talk about? No, it's true.
I was wondering about that because Wenju's relationship with Leanne is very caustic, I think, and I can only really confidently say that from the perspective, Leanne's perspective, because the story about their friendship is told from her perspective, but I think you can also deduce that to some extent from Wenju as well, although her point of view isn't quite as shared. I'm just wondering, have you ever had a relationship with a friend that informed that sort of description of their relationship, like a friend that whether you or that friend was like really influential in terms of their behavior outside of what is maybe like comfortable for one of you, or one of you left for a while and then returned to the life of the other and had a bunch of background. How did you like so credibly and authentically, or seemingly authentically, write about that relationship?
Thank you. I mean, thankfully, I don't have anyone in my life that it's a specific stand-in for Wenyu. I don't have this friendship now. Yeah. But like, I think I definitely identify with Nan in many ways, and the kind of like feeling of constantly asking myself. It's not just like what can I have? What else can I have? It's more of like, how much should I ask for, and how much should I want? And the constant feeling of like, if someone else has something, should I also want that? And so I definitely identify with her. And then, but her dynamic with Wenyu, I think, was inspired a lot because I think like growing up, I was definitely like, I was compared. I feel like me and one of my friends, especially, were compared to each other a lot. We kind of did similar things. We were both kind of artistic. We both, did Model UN. We were the Model UN girls, and so we had that kind of rivalry going on. A bit one-sided on my part, but it was it's always one-sided, right? It's like it's never as balanced, and that's why there's a rivalry, and so I think I that kind of like envy and comparing yourself to people. I think that's been a big part of my life growing up. Like I went to a very competitive elite high school where like everyone was constantly pitted against each other all the time. So I think that's just like been a part of my psyche for so long. So when I sat down to write a book, I knew that I wanted to write something that was about like comparison and envy and looking at others and feeling like your life is worse and so yeah, I think like, but I think thankfully I don't have any friendships that persist till now in that same dynamic as Lian and Wenyu. I think thankfully I've been able to kind of come to terms with my relationships from high school more. Hopefully I'm a little more mature. I don't know. Lian, I understand her struggles, and especially when someone that hasn't been in your life for that long, because they've been apart for like over a decade, and then they didn't see each other in person for that entire time. So like I've been able to kind of like see my friends more often, so like then we kind of like gradually grow together and reshape our dynamic together that way. So I've never had like a period of time where it's like 10 years have gone by and it's like you fall back into those same patterns.
Yeah.
I have to say, as a friend who we haven't seen each other in like
That's true.
7 years or something like that.
That's true. We met in LA.
Incredible and you've always been so supportive, and it's just very exciting to see thy mind is very opal, like because Claire is, yeah, it's just it's an amazing thing that like you have that magnet, like that breadth of observation of people, and being able to saying like, okay, high school, sure, you may have that experience, but also that yeah.
Thank you, Anna.
Incredible to like to have that sort of dynamic play out on the page and be like, I'm just an incredible friend.
Thank you so much, Anna. And like Anna, is That's so nice. Yes, that I'm an amazing person. Thank you so much. Didn't plant her there.
Great character witness. Great character witness. Yeah.
Well, thank you. And Anna and I met, when we were like more fully formed humans and in our 20s. And I feel like it's like I met so many people then when I liked myself more. And so I feel like our friendship's been able to last longer because it's like who we wanted to be as opposed to like who I just sort of like stumbled into being as a kid.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know Wenyu and Leon, they haven't seen each other for 10 years, but once they see each other again, it just kicks off.
Yeah.
Like it didn't miss a beat.
No,
and I'm sure there are
absolutely.
people in our lives are just like that. A long time
For
could go
sure.
by, but when we see them, it's just like nothing has changed.
For sure.
So I think
for
you really
sure.
captured that well in the prose.
Thank you. Thank you.
Dan, did you have a question?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Everybody, I'm Dan. Curious about any sort of cultural undertone that's present in
That's a good
the
question.
characters
Mhm.
or the plot itself that you could express to an audience member like myself who may be a bit ignorant to Chinese culture.
Yeah. You know what's interesting? When I went back and did my original round of research in 2014, I went in with a lot of my own biases where I just sort of assumed that like Chinese people are more conservative. They don't their like love life and sex life is going to be different than Americans. But then after conducting the summer of research, I realized it's not as different as I thought, and like it's actually like they want Chinese people, Americans, like we all kind of want similar things, and like there's not as much of like hookup culture there, but that does exist, and it's not like something that's so foreign. And so I think for me, it was more of a journey of realizing that it's actually a little bit more similar than I thought it would be. So I do think that like there's nothing in the book that you're gonna be like, whoa, like why did they do that? Like I think it'll be pretty familiar, but also I think I'm very much specifically examining these kind of like upper middle class Beijingers. What I found in Beijing is that real estate is a huge thing that people talk about. I mean, this is true of many, people in their early 30s, late 20s, in a lot of cities, but especially in Beijing, it's what we're talking about is can we buy a house or not? The
Yeah.
answer is no. But in Beijing, I had found that was like an especially prevalent conversation that people were having, and I think it speaks to kind of, I will say that like one big cultural thing is in Beijing, a lot of people who can afford to buy a condo in the city in Beijing are people who are either from the city or like their parents have given them a lot of support to buy a condo. And so I think there's like a lot more of like that kind of a support system, like lineage. But of course, there's people in the U.S. as well who get a lot of support from their parents, which is great in some ways. But but yeah, I think like it'll be largely pretty familiar, but there is some stuff like that that's a little bit more Beijing specific.
But to follow up on this question, the answer is no then, which is that was the cultural dimension just because there's not that much of the fact that this is staged in Beijing is more a statement of similarity between cultures as opposed to, I mean, is that what I heard?
I don't know that I'm making a statement. I think I'm sort of like exploring kind of like, similarities and differences. And I think like I wanted to put it in Beijing in order to, make America and the Western world more of the outsider. And just sort of like, I feel like China is so exoticized and seen as this very strange place. But I wanted to make the US the strange place in my story. And kind of just like really poke holes in the American dream. But yeah, so certainly like setting in Beijing is very intentional. I wanted to set it there because it's my favorite city in the world. And it's specifically, yes, like a city of striving. I think it is the city in which I think people work the hardest. And I mean, the argument can be made for a lot of cities, but people just like work nonstop there in a way that like I could really never. And so I'm very impressed and just also curious about what drives that. And there's some characters in the novel that are not as privileged as my main characters, and I got the chance to explore like where they're from as well, and why they feel like they need to do the things they do to achieve their dreams. So that was a lot of fun, but it was hard because that's not my experience, that lived experience, but it was cool.
Yeah, and I think China did play a role in the story because obviously this is a generalization. But based on my experience, I have found some people in China
Hmm.
tend to be status conscious and
Yeah, yeah,
in pursuit of material wealth, largely because it's a developing country.
yeah.
So I think that does play a role here in the story as well, because that
Totally.
parlays into people comparing themselves to other authors. And obviously
Absolutely.
that's a generalization, but that's something I noticed in the story.
No, thank you. It's I think I definitely it's a specific moment in which China is like is now like a global superpower,
Mhm.
and life in China is in many ways better than it is in this country.
Yeah.
And so, people have more money in some areas and for some groups of people, and their lives are very comfortable. So I wanted to kind of showcase that.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So I think we can move on to the next theme, which is basically about assimilation.
Yeah.
So as we mentioned before, Chen, the architect, goes to the US for his PhD, which is seen as the gold standard, the golden ticket that represents success in the world. But English doesn't come naturally to him, and that leads to the institution judging him and penalizing him.
Hmm.
So I thought that his failure was symbolic,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
He's punished in a way for not assimilating fast enough,
Yeah.
for not being seen as American enough.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably a struggle that a lot of immigrants to this country deal
Hmm.
with.
Yeah.
And in order to find success here, many
Yeah.
of them have to become Americanized.
Yeah.
So I wonder if you could talk about that and maybe how it relates to your parents' journey. And
Yeah.
I know that we also have some people who have immigrated, like Junhan,
Yeah.
from another country here. So if they want to talk about that, feel free as well.
Oh, totally. I'm so curious because, I specifically hone in on the idea of English language and that being the thing that Chen just cannot master. And it feels kind of small, but I have seen the ways in which not being able to speak English can make or break whether you fit into this country. And it's not just the speaking of the language; it's like the understanding of like how it's spoken, the references, even just like me growing up like a Chinese American, there's like so many American references that I just don't get. Like TV shows, anything, any TV show. You ask me about it, I don't know. And like, and then then I decided to work in TV. Interesting choice. So I literally I've been doing catch up since I decided to do that because I just never watched it growing up. I watched only Chinese television, and so it's like ways in which you don't fit in that you can't even begin to name as someone that's part of the majority. It's I wanted to kind of illuminate the small things that can add up to one big vast unfitting. And so Chen, yeah, it's also I think with the language thing, it's a thing where he could have become good at it if he made it his mission to become very good at it. But he kind of, you'll read and you'll see there's certain choices that he makes where he he decides maybe he doesn't want to put in that effort or just doesn't sees it as like assimilating for assimilation's sake, and he doesn't feel like that's necessary. He feels like he can ride on his talent and his intellect alone. Which is, that's what you're told when you immigrate to America. Like, you're told that, like, as long as you work hard enough and you're smart enough, you'll succeed. But in fact, you need a lot more than that. So
Yeah, I think it's great because you left a little ambiguity there. Is his resistance to learning English, is that a principled stance or is that just a stance of laziness, right?
Right.
And so that's really in the eyes of the reader to make that factual determination. You don't force it down our throats, but we got to use our own brains, which I think is really great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Usually I don't use it, so.
Same. No, it's true, and it's like it's kind of like it's not necessarily even laziness, but it's sort of like an unwillingness to be undignified, which I also understand not being willing to do that. So you'll see. I mean, I'm curious if you read Chen's section. Should he have just learned it or not? I don't know.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
To be continued.
To be continued.
So, does anyone have anything they want to add on that theme before I move on? Joyce?
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah.
as an American Chinese, Chinese American, what kind of sacrifices do you think you have to, make if you were to move to China? Have you thought about cultural differences? Because
Yeah.
I know for our generation, well, that's the same generation. Like most people move from China to the US, right?
Yeah.
You don't see so many people doing it the other way around.
Yeah.
But yeah, sometimes I wonder, would there be a time when, people of Chinese heritage will start moving back to China? And what kind of challenges and sacrifices you would have to make doing that?
No, thank you for that question. And I want to hear more about your experience as an interpreter and like your decision to come here, because I think about this a lot of, I love China and I love Beijing so much, and I'm lucky enough that all my grandparents are still alive and live there, and I get to go back and see them now with like kind of some frequency. And it's like my big dream to be able to live in Beijing for like an extended period of time, because the longest time I've ever spent there is like 4 months. Like I've never been able to spend like a continuous year there. But it's in a way that's by choice. Like I could have, but I chose other things. I chose my career. I chose my family here. I chose my friends. And it's still like a huge dream of mine. But it's weird because I don't think I could actually live in China long term, because I think in so many ways I am such an American in the way that I just behave and live in the world. I think kind of like I think it's interesting. Just like I worked for a Chinese company in the summer of 2014, the same summer that I went and did research. I worked for a Chinese education company, which is probably what inspired Lian's job in this book. But it was so funny because I like didn't fit in there in ways that like I didn't even expect I wouldn't fit in. I went in, I was very, very nervous about the language aspect, because my Chinese is very good, but in a professional setting, it's a little bit, there's vocab that I don't know. And but my boss calls me in like a few weeks into the job, and she's like, "You use too many hand gestures when you talk." And I was like, heard, putting my hands here. But it's like I literally can't control it. You probably noticed, I love to talk with my hands. And so it's like, and she was like upset about it. She was like, it's like very distracting. And it's not, I'm Italian, I guess. And I wouldn't have this problem in Italy. And it's interesting. It's like, I picked this up here, and I feel like it's very, it reflects kind of like I have a bigger personality. I love to talk, and it just doesn't sort of fit in with the kind of like personality. It's also maybe a gendered thing, like the kind of personality expected of women in China. And so I think in that way, I think like being here, I can really like be myself, and which is interesting, such an ironic thing to say, because I was just talking about how like being a minority in America, you have to like force yourself to fit in all these different ways. So it's interesting because like I have done it for so long that I don't even know what I have sacrificed in order to fit in here. But I can think of all the things that I would have to sacrifice in order to fit in China, which is just it's interesting. I don't think I could ever live there long term, which is so strange to think, because I love it, and I would want to live there for like a medium amount of time, like an amount of time where it's like I'm not here forever, but I'm here for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Because to be somewhere forever, it really feels like you have to be of that place, for me, at least.
Your book doesn't really have any American characters, except with the exception of When You's Fiance. And as you mentioned, When You's Fiance's story and feelings aren't explored really to any great extent. But the only sort of reference to Americans or American culture is like a very like white majority dominant one. And I was just wondering if you at any point in this, like the drafts of the book, had like a Chinese American character or any role for an American character, regardless of their racial or ethnic background, and what decisions kind of guided your kind of exclusion of that perspective, whether just like a general American perspective or a Chinese American perspective more specifically, or the perspective of a, Latino American or anyone,
Right.
From a different background, but specific to that background.
Thank you for this question. I've never gotten this question before. So in various drafts, yes. The answer is yes. I ultimately, okay, how do I answer this question? For a long time, there was a Chinese American character in this novel. Basically, this is a light spoiler, but this happens kind of very soon into the book. But Lian maybe develops some sort of dynamic with a student of hers, and in the current book. But this student used to be a Chinese American colleague of hers, and I explored. I think he was a more obvious way of exploring like Lian's desire for America,
Okay.
and I really liked writing that character, and I liked exploring that dynamic. But ultimately, I felt like the one question of like, because in those drafts, Lian was exploring more concretely, like, what if I went to the U.S. now? And there was like a whole plot where like he works for the U.S. office, and she was maybe going to go and work there, and I ultimately felt that the actual question of should I live in the U.S. or should I live in China was not really what I cared to question for her. Like it was more about like I wanted to explore it more generally of do I like my life as it is or do I want it to be different? And I felt like I was getting too in the weeds with the plot of the like should I go to the U.S. or stay here? So I ultimately decided to get rid of the Chinese American character, even though it was very interesting. I had a lot of fun. I did a lot of kind of misdirects where like she thinks that he's white at first, but then he turns out to be Chinese American, and it's kind of like it was kind of a commentary of how like Chinese people don't really even think about Chinese Americans.
Well, yeah, and I noticed that
Yeah.
they, with one another, when you just talk about Americans as if they're exclusively white. Like there's comments about how they laughed about how Americans show their age so much earlier, which what they mean is they laugh about how any Caucasian person, whether they're Europe, Canada, or anywhere else, would show their age, but they don't even seem to like think about themselves, identify Americans as anything that aren't white people. Which is interesting that when you doesn't, because she's at that point lived in the U.S. for like 12 years.
That's true. I mean, I wanted to present America as like the kind of very narrow thing that they would aspire to and want to understand like from childhood. And so for Lian, yes, like she, despite all her knowledge and studies on America, doesn't actually know what it's like. So it's very it's just sort of like white Americans. That's what they think of when they think of America. They don't really know anything about like the vast diversity of America. And when you similarly, when she kind of gets back together with Lian, like that's what she's talking about. And also, I would say for like kind of like well-to-do Chinese immigrants in the U.S., they really are not hanging out with a lot of people of color, like besides other Chinese immigrants and oftentimes white communities. Like that's what happens. And so for her America is still quite white. Yes.
Yeah.
So I have a story to share sort of to this.
Oh,
so
yes.
I studied abroad in China in 2008, 2009, 2010, and like no one would believe me that I was American.
Hey,
But
yes.
then they also thought I was Beyonce, so it was really
Okay, right. Hey, not Beyonce.
Also,
Yeah.
I remember
Fine.
I was on the Great Wall with my parents. They came to visit me my second time in China, and we were on the Great Wall, and everyone was like, "Oh, you're Indian. You're Indian." And we're like,
Okay.
nope. We're American. They just like could not believe it. It was also so interesting that this is like Obama is president at this time. Like,
Right.
the NBA is like really kicking off in terms of like China fandom.
Yeah.
And there were all these reasons that America was looking like a different place.
Yes.
But at the same time, it was still really hard for people to just compute that like America was not a white country.
Yes. Yes.
And so
totally.
I'm like taken back to all those memories when like listening to this conversation. So I wanted to add that perspective, like lived experience of like this exact thing.
Okay, I love that, and I want your novel about your time.
There are many stories.
Okay, that's amazing. Let's truly Chinese people really be active like that. Yes. Yes. Yes.
I have a question. I thought it was fascinating when you were talking about gratitude, and I'd love to hear more about how you integrated the idea, the concept of gratitude with your characters, because I'm a grandmother and I such a proud grandmother. And one of the biggest things I hope I taught my children is the value, the utter importance of feeling grateful.
Yeah.
Because feeling grateful is a gift.
Yeah.
And gratitude is such an enriching gift. And I don't think many people write about that or talk about it or explore it. How did you do that in your book?
Thank you. It's interesting. I feel like gratitude is something, I'm constantly trying to exercise in my own life, but sometimes unsuccessfully. And I feel like it's something that all of these characters could do to have a little bit more of, but then kind of arrive at it in different ways, or maybe don't arrive at it at all. And generally, yes, like being more gracious can make you happier in your life. But I think in some ways these characters feel like it can kind of what do you call it, set them back as well, or like keep them from getting the thing that they really want. And like, but obviously it'd be better if they were all a little bit more thankful, but in that case the story wouldn't exist.
Yeah. You wouldn't have a novel.
I wouldn't have a novel if we were all just happy with our lives every day.
And that was a really powerful point. We all could be
Mhm.
more grateful. I mean,
That's true.
yeah, I mean,
I
something we're all working on, I think. So,
Mhm.
so I wanted to get the next theme with you, Claire, which is about ambition and cutting corners.
Mhm.
Okay. So Chen, as I mentioned, was hired to build the Beijing home, and he did it in part because he wanted money to buy a condo for his son.
Yes.
And so at this time, he's under pressure financially, emotionally, and socially to be able to afford this condo. So he starts cutting corners with building Wen-Yu's home and starts using cheaper materials. And I don't want to give anything away, but that does lead to some consequences down the line. And so I think that this dilemma really forces a lot of questions. One thing is about his ambition. In some ways it's sympathetic because he wants to do something for his son. It's not for himself. On the other hand, his actions have consequences for others. So is doing it for your family makes something ethical? I mean, obviously my point of view is no, right? I mean, is the goal that he's even chasing just to buy a condo for his son, is that even a worthy goal that he should be focusing on so intently? But I wanted you to talk about that because it's a little bit more complex than him just trying to do something selfishly for himself. He is actually trying to provide for his family, which makes it at least somewhat sympathetic.
It's true. I mean, I think like the most interesting questions in art that are asked are morally ambiguous ones.
Yeah.
And it's like I think everyone will have a different opinion on the choices that all these characters make. It's so funny. This is a side note about Lian's storyline, but a lot of people, I mean, I've already kind of implied this a bunch, but there is cheating that occurs in Lian's section of the book, and it's been very interesting to see in the reviews. Just like some people, for them, that is an unforgivable choice and a mistake to make, and it kind of colors their entire read of the book.
Yeah.
And then others see it as something that's human and it can happen. And it's just it's like everyone has their own personal relationship to the mistakes that are made in this book. And obviously, like I don't have any interest in assigning moral judgment to anyone in the book. And I think like in a way I understand why all these characters make the decisions they do, which is why I wrote it. And I think like Chen is someone who so basically his goal in his section of the book is he wants to build this amazing, perfect home for Wenyu in order to make enough money to buy his own son a nice condo because his son's about to get married. And so he's kind of, his son is kind of going through the same thing that Lian is going through, and Wenyu is, but he, and on top of all this, his wife is trying to leave him, wants a divorce because she's fed up with him. And he thinks that if he can like get enough money to buy his son a nice condo, she'll see like I actually am a great father and husband, and she'll stay. So he's really doing all this in order to get his wife to stay. and save his family in a way. But so it's, I think, like, some might say that's a very noble thing to do. Some might, look through it and see, like, you're just trying to kind of like rewrite your narrative and not face the fact that, like, you failed and you failed in your life in some ways, and just like, and accept your mistakes and move on.
Yeah.
But I get it. If I were him, I'd try everything to keep my girl. Like, I understand, like, why he does what he does, but it's interesting because I think a lot of the choices that we make in our life are not, we can't foresee the consequences. Like, there's so many, bad things or good things that can happen. But if you like me, like, I wouldn't have written this book if I knew it was going to take 10 years to write it. Like, that's the consequence that I lived.
Yeah.
And but I didn't know that, so I just sort of like put one foot ahead of the next, and then before I knew it, it was a decade. And I think that's like basically just how every choice works, where like Chen might choose to just like cut corners here and there, and in the moment it's maybe not that big of a deal. Like, maybe, you kind of like, this floor here, you kind of use slightly cheaper materials, maybe it doesn't hurt anyone. And for the most part it doesn't. That, like, usually it doesn't have a huge consequence, but then sometimes it can. And but we don't go into decisions thinking there are going to be big consequences.
Yeah, and that's what keeps life interesting in some ways, right? We don't know what's going to happen, so there's that uncertainty. Sorry, go ahead.
So first off, I absolutely love this book for so many different reasons. One of the reasons that I loved it is that it's filled with misdirects and kind of some twists and turns. And if I had to rename the book, it would be called Lying.
Ooh.
Ooh, lying.
Lying.
That's a lie. That was a lie. And so I guess my question is, and I also appreciate that as a reader, because I try to figure things out and, like, see if I can, who done it, like in a mystery, like, can I figure out who did it. So I like when I get surprised, because I'm very hard to surprise. And so I was surprised many times, which I appreciate.
Okay.
And so my question to you is, if you can answer the question without spoiling it, you can also, like, maybe give a 3-word answer.
Okay.
Okay. Not spoil something. But what is your favorite lie / misdirect in the book?
That's a great question.
There's.
You can say, like, character.
Interesting.
Maybe, like,
Interesting.
2 words or something, so that those who haven't read it, or you can also tell me later. But there's who've read it who also maybe want to know the answer to this question.
I like a lot of them. I feel like I can't answer it without spoiling some stuff.
Okay.
But there are multiple, as you said, and I like them all in different ways. I feel like I kind of like unveil them in kind of different ways. Each of them I unveil in a different way, so that was fun to do. But I can't. I'll tell you later.
I want to be present.
Yes.
Anybody
Okay.
can do a group chat.
Yeah. Okay. Once you've read the book,
yeah,
you can talk to us.
And one thing that's really interesting is just about how Chen is telling himself that he's doing a morally right thing.
Yeah.
And they say the easiest person to deceive is yourself.
Yeah.
And I think this book really showcases how easily it is to deceive yourself.
Yeah, for sure.
So
I lie to myself every day.
yeah, that's why we need, I think, other people in our lives who will call us out when we're deceiving
Absolutely.
ourselves. Junhan is great at that. If anyone needs a hand.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. We all need Junhan.
Yeah.
It's true. I'm like, I'll be there at 11 a.m. I'm not there.
Yeah.
11 a.m.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. So I wanted just to get to a couple of quotes in the book that I thought were really powerful, and feel free to add any that you'd like to. So the first quote I had was, dwelling on the past versus accepting the present. And I'm sorry the text got a little cut off. My printer was not completely complying all the way. But I think that this quote is very powerful, because basically this quote is about how we're oftentimes thinking about choices in our past. If we had done things differently, would we be in a different place right now? Whereas in the end, this character just realizes that all she has is a choice that she made. So instead of fixating on this alternate fantasy life, she just accepts the version that is left. And I talked about this earlier, but I think that is so powerful. Accepting who you are and where you are in life.
Thank you.
Instead of always be fantasizing about alternate realities.
Yeah.
So
thank you. Do you want me to read this?
Sure, go ahead, please.
Being in America, I realized that failure can come for anyone, anywhere. Perhaps I would have been happier had I stayed. Perhaps I wouldn't have. All I have is the choice I made. It's true.
Yeah.
It's true. I need to learn all the lessons that Claire
Yeah.
has learned in this book, okay? Because
exactly.
I haven't been able to accept anything.
Yeah, you and me both. So,
Yeah.
and then another quote I want to talk about was when failure becomes unspeakable.
Mm-hmm.
So Chen's dream collapses,
Mm-hmm.
but he decides to keep it a secret.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that happens to a lot of us in life. Like we
Mhm.
suffer something that we think is embarrassing, whether
Mhm.
someone breaks up with us,
Mm-hmm.
we suffer a job loss, whatever the case may be. We don't want to share it with others because we're afraid of being judged.
Yeah.
And we actually make a mountain out of a molehill. We make something
That's
bigger
true.
than it actually is.
That's true.
And if we were actually, I think our friends and loved ones would actually be a lot less judgmental of us
Yeah.
than we think that they would be.
Yeah.
So, and also he's not willing to tell his wife this,
Mhm.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
so the spouse is usually the one, like the person that we could find the most in. So the fact that
Yeah.
he's not even willing to make himself vulnerable for his spouse
Yeah.
is actually something that drives him away,
Yeah.
because being vulnerable with other people is actually a great way to create intimacy.
It's true.
So it actually leads to problems with his
It's
marriage.
true.
So I think that's super fascinating.
I mean, I feel like it's like oftentimes the people that you're closest to, you sometimes lie to them the most because it's like there's the highest stakes there
Yeah.
of revealing who you really are.
Yeah.
And so for Chen, yeah, he wants to kind of believe that he is a certain way.
Yeah.
And not let his wife see the real him.
Yeah.
Because she's the one that he wants to impress the most.
Yeah. But I took this as just really just emphasizing the importance of vulnerability.
That's
And
true.
being comfortable exposing ourselves to others, because
Yeah.
it honestly can bring you closer with others as well.
That's true.
So
That's true. I mean, even in like the course of writing this book, I feel like I'm so thankful for this book for many reasons, but it's how I was able to make my best friends in LA. Like these are the people that, I came to LA, I didn't know anyone, and I was writing this book and I needed readers. I needed people to help me with it because I was just like by myself in my room all day, like banging my head against the wall. And then I met friends who were writers, and I asked them, like, can you please read my book? Like, can you do me the huge favor of reading a 350-page manuscript?
Yeah.
And it was hard. It was a hard ask, but I did it, and like that's what brought me closer to them because like I saw they were willing to go out on a limb for me, and like I was willing to do that for them.
Yeah.
And so it was like, yeah, asking for help, admitting that you can't do it at all.
Yeah.
It's very
Exactly. I think asking for help can bring you close to others, because like when I
That's
ask for
true.
someone for help and they help me,
Mhm.
it brings me closer to them, and vice versa when I
That's
offer
true.
a helping hand as well. So
It's true.
I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that they wanted to share.
Amen.
Amen. Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Chen really could have learned that.
For the sequel, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So these are just some other questions I had for you, Claire.
Yeah.
So one thing that I think is fascinating is that this story is told about someone who went to China
Yes.
and came back to the U.S.
Yes.
Whereas your story is the opposite, right? Because you
Yes.
are from the U.S. and you went to China, but you come
Yes.
back to the U.S.
Yes.
So I wonder if you could talk about why you told the story from something the opposite of your own experience.
Well, I really wanted to write a story that was set in China and told by Chinese people, because I think, like, I don't think I'm yet prepared to write about like what it feels to be a Chinese American here. I just think that it's still, I think Chinese American writers, like, we're still very mired by kind of the majority, the American majority, and like speaking to them. And I just didn't really want to have to think about that. I wanted to write from the point of view of a Chinese majority that don't have to like pander to Americans, and the Americans are just like the thing they make fun of, or the thing that they're confused about or talking about, but it's not like they're not like considering Americans in the way that they're like living their lives. And so I really wanted to just, I just didn't want to write as a Chinese American for this one. I wanted to write as a Chinese person. And it was kind of like my own, in a way, it was like my own experiment as well, to see like how Chinese I could really be and really feel. And obviously, but it's like, it wasn't my experience. Like it was like an exercise of fantasy every day that I sat down and did this. And like fantasy, and also just like in my own desire to kind of like fit in there in China? And kind of like constantly asking myself, like, how Chinese am I really? And like, how much do I really have the right to tell this story? So short answer is that I just didn't want to talk about Chinese American things in the US. Like, I didn't find it that interesting. And I found like Chinese people's lives in China more interesting to talk about.
Wow. Yeah, and so was that something you were struggling with, feeling like you could authentically represent the Chinese experience?
For sure. Like, I think I have a lot of imposter syndrome with it. And, you know, I mean, I make myself feel better because I'm like, so white people write about China all the time. Like, it's fine. But Lisa C is out here, you know, 1/100th Chinese, and she's writing things like, you know, Snowflower in the Secret Pan. So, I was like, it's fine. I can write this book. But yeah, no, it's certainly something that I thought about a lot. And you know, I also encourage people to, oh yes, there's questions over here. I encourage people to like read Chinese literature as well. And from people who actually live there. And there's like so much amazing Chinese literature that the majority of Americans have never read.
Yeah, there is.
I wonder, I assume you've done this sort of thing in China a fair amount as well.
This kind of
sort of, reading or discussion?
I have not. My book just came out in July, and yes, and I'm still working on getting a Chinese publisher, but it's very difficult. And I had a few talks with them earlier this year, and I got to meet with two publishers. One of them was a very big publisher in Beijing, and it was very funny because I like walk into this room where like at my agency's offices, and there's like 4 editors sitting in a row, and I walk in and I just like sit down and they're like interrogating me. And these people have, you know, read my book, but then come here to tell me that they don't want to publish it, but they are here to meet me anyway. Like the first thing that they give me a stack of their own books that are short stories, and they go, might we recommend you start with short stories first before you attempt a novel? And I was like, okay, I already did the novel, but thank you. Thank you. And they were like, we don't feel that it's yet like that the great Beijing novel that we're looking for. And I was like, honestly, like I felt flattered that you would even like consider me in the running to write this book,
Yeah.
right? Because I grew up in America, so it's like the fact that like it was, you know, a Beijing enough story for you to even feel like, oh, like why is this Beijinger not quite nailing the essence of the city? You know, right? I'm like, right? Right? It's like must be somewhere within the ballpark if you're even telling me this. So that was like a really interesting feeling. But I'm still pursuing Chinese translation. I hope that I can have these talks there as well, because I'm so curious how Chinese people are going to receive this. I had some.
Like to do this again once it's done that.
That's true. I'll report back.
We're flying all of you out.
Yeah. Everyone come to China.
Yeah.
You gotta take it. You gotta take it.
You gotta take it.
And okay, Joyce. Let's talk. Obviously, it's like my big dream to get this published in Chinese, because then like my family can read it there. My grandparents can read it.
Are you worried about that at all? Do you have any uncle that's like, oh, Chen is a little bit like me, right? Like that?
I mean, you know, yes.
Okay.
I don't know if they're gonna realize it, and if they watch this YouTube video, I'm lying. Okay, and it's my family. So my parents have read it, and it was so cute. My mom just texted me right before this, being like, "I'm reading your book for the second time," and it's very adorable because she's actually read it more than that. She read like other drafts in the past, and my dad, who never reads, read the whole book and texted me all his thoughts as he was reading. It was very sweet. He was like, I identify a lot with Lian as someone who's always done what she thinks she has to do, but then never really like asks herself like, what do you really want? And I'm like, wow, Dad, we gotta get you a therapist. Okay. And it was really sweet. So I feel like I've already they've already read it, so like that's the scary part. Like, you know, there's some scenes in the book. This book is not like terribly sexual, but like there's some scenes in the book where it's a little bit. And my father read it, and he just goes, there are some graphics in this chapter.
Graphics.
I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah, moving on.
Yeah. Okay. Next
Yeah.
topic. Yeah.
Next topic.
Zach.
So you wrote this over 10 years, and you obviously matured over the course of 10 years. But I think about myself at 30 versus 40, and like trying to write a novel 10 years ago and now. And so, how did that influence? If I had started 10 years ago, how did that influence like the course of writing the book? Like, what major changes it occurred as you were writing the book? Like, you know, like
No, it's
the
so much.
characters and like
Yes.
what are the biggest changes that occurred? I'm sure that
Yes.
there was emotional depth.
No, truly. What didn't occur? You know, like it's just like, I mean, I started writing this book as just like basically a joke when I was 20 to avoid my responsibilities, and at the time I was just sort of like, it was interesting. Like I really, it was just an exercise of let me create this Chen character, let me create this Lian character. At the time, Lian, I was more interested in, it was her and a different friend that I was examining. It wasn't Wenyu at the time. It was a friend that came from the provinces and had less privilege than her, and had to make different choices in the city because she didn't grow up in the city like Lian did. So that story was more about, you know, the different choices that women have to make in Beijing depending on where they're from. And it was like a lot more, I think for that story, it was a lot more like me looking in from the outside, like totally from the outside. But eventually I became more interested and also felt like it made more sense for me to tell a story that at least had a character that had been to the US and could kind of serve as an outsider character herself. Because I just felt like that was a story, like the story that I had previously written. I mean, speaking of kind of like what we were just saying with like who's allowed to tell a story, I just felt like that wasn't a story that I could authentically tell without a lot more research, and which I was willing to do, but I just felt like I wasn't, like I'm not the person to tell a story of like a young struggling woman from like the countryside in China. And like there is another character in the book who has that background now. Like I'm so bad at like killing my darlings. I just like put new skin on top of them. And so this character, this old friend character, I kind of repurposed her into a different like character that doesn't have as much weight in the novel. So I think that's just sort of like the focus of the novel changed a lot. And as I just sort of like grew and was writing it, you know, when you do something for 10 years, it's sort of like by the end of it, like you're really only writing the stuff that you really, really like writing. Because it's just, if you don't like writing it, you're just not going to get to it after staring at your computer for 8 hours. So I just became just more interested in like this like character that went to the US and came back. And so the story shifted a lot in that way. And also like the ages of my characters shifted a lot. Like when I first started writing it, I was 20 years old, and I think Lian was maybe like 25. I was like, how could anyone be older than 25? That's like the oldest age you could be. And I really felt like that's the age when you have to make all your big decisions. And then obviously then I kept writing it, and then I was like, well, now I'm 25 and I feel so young and tiny. So now she's gonna be a little bit older, and it's just like eventually I became older than Lian's character, which is crazy because she was always supposed to be the character that was like struggling with decisions that I had yet to have to struggle with. But then I kind of surpassed her, or like these are decisions that I ostensibly should have grappled with, but have put off for myself, such as who to marry. Okay, we'll talk about that later.
Okay.
So
That was gonna be my next question.
yeah.
Nini.
I know that the author usually doesn't have any say in the cover of the book, but I wonder what you feel the cover, which is a great cover.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love it.
I love this cover. Thank you so much. So Tin House, they have an in-house designer who is amazing. And I sent them a very detailed document of do's and don'ts of what I like. I really wanted something, you know, very like eye-grabbing and something very painterly. And you know, I gave them a very long, obnoxious document. And then they sent me back this. This was actually like the only version they sent me, and the entire team was very confident. And I'm really glad because it's so striking, and I feel like I really wanted the image on there to be something that was like related to the novel, but not in such an obvious way. Like the book centers around a house, but I didn't want there'd just be like a house on the cover. And so instead we landed on these swimmers. There's 3 swimmers. The theme of threes is a very big theme in the novel. Like I said, there's cheating, so that's a third. And then just sort of like the threes, but then also cheating as a metaphor or as a stand-in for the question of like, do I choose this life or this life, and like the triangle that forms and like the paths that you take in your life. And so I wanted there to be kind of like a triad situation going on the cover. And then the swimmers, it's there's several key swimming scenes or scenes that involve a pool in the novel. So I kind of wanted it's kind of like a little bit of an uncanny, like, what is she swimming? Like, what is she flying? Is she swimming? I wanted people to be kind of confused about what's actually going on the cover. So I really love what they did.
Yeah, it's a beautiful color. We actually have added it to the Amaris Lending Library.
Oh my
So
God, I love.
yeah.
That's so great.
And can you talk about the title of the book, Wanting? Do you think that was the word that best encapsulated the novel?
You know, it's funny. I'm so bad at titling. Like, oh, it's so hard. I don't know how people do this. And I never, over the course of 10 years, I never had one very solid title for my novel. And this novel actually went out as a different title when I went on submission. But my editor felt like they wanted something more evocative of the actual themes of the novel. The original title was something that was just like a little bit more kind of more mysterious. It was called Little Thirds, which is a translation of of like a derogative term in Chinese for like mistress. And
Shao San?
yes, you know.
I don't know anything about that, but I know the word. I know the word.
Okay. Yeah. Yes.
Vocabulary
Okay.
stage.
Yes. So, but my editor wants something that it was like that could sort of like immediately showcase the themes of the novel. And now I never thought my book was gonna be a one-word title because I feel like that's very epic.
Yeah.
But like the Odyssey, I guess that's 2 words, but whatever. Okay.
We don't count that.
That's fine. Yeah. But I gradually I was like, I do like this title a lot because I like the double entendre of it. It's the action of wanting, but it's also the adjective of like being wanting, of lacking something, which is definitely something that all these characters feel. And so yeah, I feel like a lot of people, I feel like people really like say this word a lot in reviews as well.
Yeah.
So that's cool.
It's a beautiful looking book. It goes with your outfit tonight as well. So.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I always like to match it.
Oh, sorry. Will, do you have a quick story about that, Cheryl?
You touched on this a couple times in previous responses, but what would you say you learned or discovered about yourself as a result of writing this?
It's a great question.
I learned so much. Namely, like, I do not have the personality to write a novel. Like, I'm much too extroverted for that. I just like being around people. And a novel is mostly just loneliness for years and years. And so I learned that I need to do it differently next time around if I write another novel. And I also learned that everything takes much longer than you think it's going to take. And specifically, everything takes longer for me than I think it's going to take. And I feel like so many times just writing my novel, I thought that the novel was going to be done in like 3 to 6 months. So I would kind of like forego opportunities because I'd be like there'd be like classes that I could take or like fellowships I could apply for like a year from then. But I'd be like, well, my book's going to be done by then, so I don't need that. And then the deadline would pass, and then a year would pass, and I would still be working on an entirely new revision. So it's it just kind of like, if I were to do it again, I'd be like, it's going to take that year, so better apply for that fellowship. And so yeah, I definitely learned a lot about kind of my work style, and then also I learned a lot about kind of the themes that I care most about. And I realized, like, writing this novel, I love just my favorite parts of writing this novel are probably like all the parts where Lien is like being very neurotic and like hyper analyzing social interactions, and Chen does that as well, and kind of being very critical of people for like very tiny things. Like I just love writing that and realizing I learned that I would love to do more of that in my next project. It's just fun to be petty. So, but yeah, no, I learned that I would need to do it a little bit differently the next time around. But I had a great time in some ways writing this book the first time.
Yeah. Did you try to keep a very strict writing schedule, like where you'd write at the same time every day and try to get a certain amount of words produced each day?
I mean, I was very dedicated to this novel. I guess I didn't tell you about like the physical process of writing it. I wrote this novella, right, in college, and then I met my agent, and then she was like, let's expand it. I turned in a draft with her in 2017.
Yeah.
Then I spent another 3 years rewriting that draft.
Yeah.
And then in 2020, she told me actually do an outline redo of this draft that you just turned in. This is a draft that I really thought was going to be it. But then she said, do it over.
Wow.
So I rewrote that, and I thought that was going to take 6 months. It took me 3 years. And so this was crazy. And okay, what was your question? Oh, I was like,
yeah.
Oh yeah. So at that point, I like quit my job to write my novel full time because, I mean, I had taken a job working for a writer at CBS because I had turned in my novel, and I was like, great, now I'm going to become a famous best-selling novelist, and I can just like work for fun right now. But then that was not going to be the case. So I was like, this is my priority. This job was just something I took because I had time, and now I don't have time. So I stepped away from the job and I did this full time. I wrote this novel. I would sit down at my desk and write it for 6 to 8 hours a day. Of course, it was not continuous writing. It was a lot of me like staring and dissociating, walking around in circles, being like, Leanne is thinking this today, and just and crying a lot, and then finally I would get like some words on the page.
Yeah.
Sometimes it'd just be like one good sentence for the whole day.
At least it was good though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then it was a pretty good sentence.
I know, writing stuff, I know.
Yeah.
Cheryl,
yeah.
I know you had a question.
I'm in a book club.
Okay.
Yeah. So sometimes the author will come and have a conversation.
Yes.
I know you live in Los Angeles.
Yes.
Sometimes on the East Coast.
Sometimes on the East Coast. Oh my God. That'd be so sweet. Well, look at the chain of events. Okay.
Yeah.
From Oliver to Cheryl, and then maybe someone else.
You said you're in a book club.
In a book club.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Oh my God! Thank you, Cheryl. Let's talk. That's so nice.
That's a great idea.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
So one last question I had for you, Claire, was, and I'm sure this is on a lot of people's minds. Do you have something in mind for what's next for you? Like, are you working on another book, another project?
I had really hoped that by the time my book came out, I could solidly be like, and I have another book coming out.
Yeah.
But many authors are like that and are very productive. But one thing I've learned about myself is that I'm not one of those people. I'm just, my brain is finally healed enough to start thinking about another project, and which is very exciting. Because if you'd asked me 2 or 3 years ago, I probably would have said I will never write another book. Okay, but now, there's no jobs in Hollywood, so there's nothing to do but write another book. So it'll probably be another book that's about, hyper analyzing dynamics between women again. But yeah, we're not sure. Kind of like I'm circling a few ideas.
All right.
We'll see.
All right. Well, keep us posted.
Thank you.
Did anyone else have any other questions? Oh, we have a few. Yeah, go ahead. Yes. Ladies first. So.
Okay, it's half-baked. Here we go. Something that reminded me of the title in the book is when I noticed that Leon brought up watching and like how watching sort of was like a barometer for how much power or like value and when you had towards each other, because and you had a line where it says, where Leanne thinks this was perhaps what most bonded the two of them, the fact that Leanne had glimpsed when you at her most fragile. And so like the amount of access that Leanne has with when you are like social currency is like this sense of intimacy. And then
Mhm.
later on, they say there was no way Wenyu would have watched her with the same sort of rapt attention as she had Wenyu over the years.
Yeah.
And then Lian, like a couple lines later, is surprised. So Wenyu had watched her too.
Mhm.
So I just I'm fascinated by the weight that is put on like witnessing, and I guess like the witnessing, the watching versus witnessing.
Yeah.
Someone.
Yeah.
And then yeah, and how
No, totally. I mean, I think no, the book could also be called Watching or Witnessing, because it is just like a lot of characters that are. I chose the POV characters because they're the ones that kind of watch the most, and that section that you read from at the beginning, that's an anecdote from Lian and Wenyu's childhood when they first met. Basically, Wenyu like tries to shoplift in front of at a grocery store, and Lian saves her by like covering for her, and it's like the first act, and she saves her because she sees that Wenyu is like about to get busted, even though Wenyu's done this a lot, and she decides to in this moment be a rebellious girl and actually help her. So she kind of sees Wenyu at like the once in her life when she's not like the most confident person in the room, and I think it's like those people, like when you like we all have like a version of ourselves that like we're selling the world, and like when people see the version that like you're not selling or it's behind the mask, like I feel like you're kind of bonded to those people, and that's one of the reasons why Lian and then similarly though, when you saw a version of Lian that she never was selling, which is that the girl that could actually break the rules and be a little tricky, so like be a little trickster. So I think in those ways they both sort of see a side of themselves that like no one has ever seen, so that's what causes them to become best friends. And then Lian sort of continues this tradition of watching, and is surprised when you knows details about her life that like she wouldn't. It's like I think like Lian being the perpetual victim, she always thinks that she's like the victim, she's the person that nobody's interested in, she's like a normal girl. She doesn't understand that like maybe she has shine too, and like other when you might look at her and be envious of her life or like be interested in her life, which is what she learns throughout the course of the book. Yes.
Is there any interest in either on your part or on the part of others in return to listen to the movie?
Definitely. I've been talking to. I have a very good agent, and she's very working hard to sell the rights. And I think this novel. I mean, my screenwriting definitely informed my writing in this novel. I feel like I kind of when I write now, it's like hard not to picture it as something on screen. I want every moment to feel very cinematic. So I really hope that we can make it specifically into a show or a movie. I think it fits well as a show, like a 6-part miniseries or something. And I think the plot is quite spicy, so I feel like it would be a great show for anyone that's watching.
It has affairs, it has lies.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I do feel like that's how we're trying to pitch it. Chinese Big Little Lies. So, thank you.
Okay, cool. Thank you
so much.
Thank you for coming. I appreciate it. Thank you. Dan, did you have a question?
That was actually my question.
Oh, really?
Medium with this content, aside from it being in book form, the most compelling to an audience? It seems like you've answered that by way of a TV show.
Yeah, definitely. I think a TV show for sure, and but like anything, an audio drama. It could be anything, really. Whoever wants to pay me money. Yeah.
Do you think you would have gotten a Chinese publisher if you used less hand gestures?
Maybe. Yes, I think so.
That was a
I love
funny
that.
question.
That's true. He's got honest on the back.
Thank you. So we will be uploading this video if anyone wants to view it in the future to this QR code here on the second to last page. It's called Happier Minds. That's our YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Really, the point of this YouTube channel is just to help people who are wanting happiness and help bring it to them. So Junon's already uploaded a 10-minute meditation.
Yes.
So
Yes.
if anyone needs help falling asleep, I mean,
I'm gonna do that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yep. And then we also are book selling.
Oh yes, I'm selling books. Please buy a copy
Yep.
because I do have to carry these home if not.
Like 3 copies.
Buy 3 copies preferably.